The title of tonight's webinar is TPP's Risk to Your Wallet. Tonight's webinar is going to focus on the economic impacts of the TPP. We'll be disputing the administration's rosy outlook for 40% of the global economy. Our special guest speakers this evening are Jeronim Capaldo. He is a research fellow with the Global Development and Environment Institute at Tufts University. He's also co-author of the Tufts Paper, Trading Down Unemployment, Inequality, and Other Risks of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Also, we welcome Celeste Drake. She is Trade and Globalization Specialist with AFL-CIO, and she will give us an analysis of the ITC Commission study. Also, later in the call, we'll have Rose Espinola, National Field Director with Public Citizens Global Trade Watch. She's going to give us an activist report on the conditions in Washington and what to expect going forward. We will also hear from Dr. Margaret Flowers with Popular Resistance and Flush the TPP, who will fill us in on the March for a Clean Energy Revolution's TPP contingent at the DNC, the TPP Truth Campaign, and the campaign moving towards the No Lame Duck TPP. Mark Cohen will fill us in on the Organizers Resource Hub, and Adam Wiseman is going to fill us in on news and reports. My name is Harriet Haywood. I am stepping in to moderate tonight since Andrea Miller is in Chicago for the People's Summit. I'm just going to mention a couple of technical details before we get on to our guest speakers and reports. You probably already know many of you, but for any new attendees, we use phone only for audio. We don't use our webcams. And we also do not use, for speakers, we don't use our speaker phone for audio because some of our listeners have low bandwidth, and we want everyone to have a quality experience. So when we put the phone into Q&A, we will mute everyone. Only the speakers will be able to unmute themselves by pressing *6. And this obviously is to cut down on any background noise. So for participants, when we do have Q&A, if you wish to speak, please just press *6. That'll be like raising your hand. And when you're called upon, please just introduce yourself, tell us where you're calling from, and if you have a question for a specific speaker, just let us know to whom your question is directed. We also have a chat room for those of you in the online meeting room over here on the left. We just ask if you try to stay on topic out of respect for our speakers. Since we do use the phone for audio to ensure quality sound and recording, we do ask all speakers to speak loudly and slowly and don't use your speaker function. You may visit peopledemandingaction.org after the call to download the current and past Trade Justice Alliance webinars, and our website is called tradejustice.net, where all webinars, trade stories, and events are posted. Last but not least, please join our new Facebook group, Trade Justice Alliance. It's 3 words. On Facebook, Trade Justice Alliance. And Carrie posts the YouTube videos there that she compiles from the slides and audio combined, and you can also find trade news and updates. So please join us there. Thanks to Tom and Carrie for working the call panel and the meeting room. And now that we have all that technical stuff out of the way, I'd like to introduce our first guest speaker, Jeronim Capaldo. Jeronim is a research fellow with the Global Development and Environment Institute at Tufts University. He's in the Globalization and Sustainable Development Program. Previously, he was a senior researcher at GDAE and a member of the Modeling and Forecasting team at the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, where he was responsible for Latin America and the Caribbean and for the analysis of global employment. prior to this at the Food and Agricultural Organization. He analyzed the economic effects of climate change in Africa and Central America. Jeronim earned a laurea cum laude in economics from the University of Rome, La Sapienza, and is currently a PhD candidate in economics at the New School for Social Research. His current research focuses on global macroeconomic models applied to trade and fiscal policy. Welcome, Jeronim Capaldo. Your line is open.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's great to have a chance to participate in this. And as I understand, I have 15 minutes. I don't see the slides yet, and I'm happy to start talking as soon as I see the first.
You should see it. It's up on the screen.
Should I press anything, or should it come up? I don't see it. I see the chat.
Oh, okay. It says trading down, unemployment, inequality, and other risks. So it's your title slide.
I don't see it. I only see the chat.
You only see the chat?
Yep.
Uh-oh.
Maybe try refresh the page.
I can't because I'm using the application on the iPad.
Oh, I don't know about the iPad.
Oh, I see it. I get it. Okay, that's great.
Yay! Okay.
Okay, I see. Sorry about that. So I see the cover slide. Okay. So as we heard a moment ago, I'm going to present very briefly the main points of my analysis of the economic effects of TPP. And it's important to realize that this is a partial analysis that only focuses on the economic effects, and they probably, although they probably aren't the most important effects, which in fact have to do, arguably with things like the investor-state dispute settlement mechanisms, an issue in social justice, the issue of distribution of rights and policy sovereignty of sovereign governments, and so on and so forth. However, the economic arguments are important. They've been in the center of the debate. They're very often the main point that is made by the proponents of this type of liberalizations, and so they're worth looking into. And that's what my colleagues and I did. We did two things. We first analyzed the modeling exercises that are behind the projections of TPP's economic effects that have been published by a number of sources. And then we've tried to understand what those projections relied on in terms of assumptions, mostly. Basically, what needed to happen for those projections to turn out to be true. And we weren't very convinced by what we found, and so we suggested alternative projections based on different assumptions. Now, there are two main sources of economic projections on TPP, and they all look at 10 to 15 years or horizons. One source, which is probably the most cited, is the one by the Peterson Institute. It's a study by the Peterson Institute. It was first done in 2012, and it was recently updated early in 2016. And there isn't a big difference between the two studies. So I just call it the Peterson Institute analysis. The figures change a little bit, the time horizon changes a little bit, but the method that they use and the assumptions that they resort to are exactly the same. So that's one. The other one, which is the only official U.S. government projections, are by the USDA Economic Research Service. And if we move to the next slide, I wonder if I should do something where it'll move. Oh, yeah, okay. Now, we'll go over a little bit what the arguments are in favor of TPP very quickly, but then we'll compare these projections. Now, as we know, the economic arguments in favor, as we often hear, the economic arguments in favor of TPP have to do with a number of things, mostly the idea that that TPP or trade liberalization in general, together with investment, would generate better access to foreign markets, would lead to a larger volume of trade, more investment, and overall faster economic growth and better economic opportunity for everybody. Next slide, please. Okay, great. Now, the question is that these ideas are confirmed by studies such as the one by the Peterson Institute and the one by USDA, but we need to understand why. Let's look at these studies for a second. And I'm going to present two tables. One, the first one you're looking at right now, is the GDP projections for gross domestic product, which is a measure of aggregate income. And the next slide, which we'll get to in a second, has projections for trade. Now, here we see that the Peterson Institute figures in terms of percentage increases by 2025. So that's about 10 years since actually 13 years since the study was published in 2012. We see that for the U.S., they're projecting a 0.4% increase in GDP. So that's 0.4% increase over 13 years. That's way lower than any reasonable projection error that macroeconomics can afford. Basically, we don't have, at the current state of our discipline, we don't have the ability to be as accurate as this number. So that number could be anything within 1 or 2%. But they are projecting a small increase of GDP. As you can see, the USDA study projects a zero change of GDP over the same period. And the reason we'll get to in a second is that because the USDA study is more conservative in the assumptions that it makes. Next slide, please. Okay, I don't see the next slide. Okay, great. So these are the trade figures. There's one interesting thing beyond the specific numbers. You can see that in the Peterson Institute study, the figures for exports show an increase in exports for every country that participates in TPP. At the same time, though, the trade surplus or the trade deficit, in other words, the net balance of trade, which is what gives us the extent to which trade contributes to aggregate demand or not, doesn't change. And that's because for all these countries in the Peterson Institute study, it is assumed that the trade deficit will not change over the projection period. So that's over 10 or 15 years. Now, there are plenty of arguments that point to the idea that the trade deficit will increase as an effect of TPP. There are some arguments that say that the trade deficit might improve as a result of TPP. But we don't know that. But one thing we're sure of is that it will not remain unchanged, because there are many factors that play in the economy, and we know that they all influence the trade surplus. So this assumption is it is very influential, but it is very unrealistic. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Okay, great. Now, what's behind these figures is, as I anticipated a second ago, it's a number of important assumptions, and there are mainly three of them that generate these results. The first one is the idea that every economy involved in TPP at all times operates under full employment. That is, you can interpret it in two ways. Either just about everybody that is in the labor force has a job, or almost everybody has a job. But the point is that even if there is a little bit of unemployment, this does not change. It does not get worse, or it does not get better at all over the whole projection period. In other words, whatever happens to the economy as an effect of TPP, in this narrative of the Peterson Institute and the same narrative of the USDA, in this narrative there is no change in employment by assumption. Obviously, this is very consequential for the results, because if there is no chance that people are going to lose their jobs, we also know that there is no chance that people are going to lose their ability to spend, and therefore there is no chance that that consumption in itself is going to withdraw its support to economic growth. So that's pretty important, and that plays a large role in explaining why in these studies we always see positive effects. The second assumption is the one that the distribution of income is constant or improving. In other words, in these studies, it is assumed that the way in which total income is distributed between labor income and profit income or capital income is such that these proportions never change over time. Now, in the U.S., we know that over the past 35 years, more or less, or a little more than that, since 1975, the cut that labor has gotten of total income has decreased quite strongly. So we know that this assumption does not reflect the U.S. reality very much. And we find many similar cases within the TPP area. And as we mentioned, the third assumption is constant trade balances. So the question is then, why are we assuming away some of the most important risks that we might be worried about when we're talking about trade and investment liberalization? So in other words, if we are trying to understand the impacts of TPP, of course we're interested very much, not just in trade, not just in investment or FDI, but we're interested in what that can do to employment and inequality. But these important effects are just assumed away. So the question then becomes, if we change these assumptions and replace them with more reasonable ones, then how do the results change? So let's go to the next slide. Okay, great, thank you. Now, we did this with the United Nations macroeconomic model, which has a number of features that you can read there, but basically what this model is a model of the macroeconomy, so a model that focuses on the impact that income distribution and, in general, aggregate demand has on the economy. So it is not a trade model, but this is not because we're not really looking into the trade effects of TPP. We're not very much interested in what it will do to the amount of chicken or lipstick or whatever other product is traded across borders, but what we want to understand is the big picture. So we're putting all these effects together with a macroeconomic model, and we're focusing on employment, inequality, and economic growth. Now, next slide, please. Okay. Okay, so if we don't have a full employment assumptions, and we don't have it, and we don't have the assumption of fixed income distribution, and we don't have it, then what happens to employment and inequality? Next slide, please. Okay, so these are our results, and we're going to focus on this for a minute, and then we can easily wrap up, because I think my time is up. So now we have 4 types of results here. The first one is the labor share. So that is obviously the cut of total income, the cut of GDP that goes to labor income. Now, we see that as a result of the fact that TPP exposes producers in every country to higher competition from producers based in other countries, then we expect that this competition will push producers and will push systems, national systems in general, to push down and try on labor and try to compress labor costs. In other words, cutting the unit labor cost or the labor cost per unit of product. Now, by doing this, of course, these countries are becoming more cost competitive and more cost efficient in the short term, but at the same time, they're weakening labor income. And regardless, even if we don't worry about the ethical or the moral problem of this, which we do, but even if we put this on the side, this causes an economic complication, because by compressing this labor income, by cutting the amount of income that goes to labor, we are also severely undermining consumption, because labor income earners tend to spend a much larger share of their income than profit earners, and therefore, if one transfers income proportionally from labor to profit, one obtains in the aggregate a reduction of consumption and residential investment and an increase in savings, which do not contribute to economic growth. So as we can see, for the U.S., there is we project a further decrease in the labor share, a small one in the order of a little bit more than 1% over 10 years, but still a reduction. Trade balance, we project a small change. This isn't very meaningful because it's still based on the Peterson Institute export numbers. We do not believe that the trade deficit will remain constant, but we did want we wanted to use their export projections in order to make our results comparable. So we adopted their export projections, and then we calculated what we expect will happen to the trade deficit. And we see that for the U.S., we see basically no change because of 0.2% in terms of change in the trade balance is basically no effect. Now, we see changes in GDP, and here we see a 0.5 or 0.6 decrease in economic growth, so that means the GDP over the period will be lower, a little bit lower. We foresee a change that is slightly bigger and negative than the positive change projected by the Peterson Institute. I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to focus on how accurate these numbers are, but this type of analysis tells us that there may be different mechanisms at play under this that are associated with different models and different assumptions. So the traditional, which we might call neoliberal vision of liberalization, says that if one cuts the costs of trading, then everything becomes more efficient, people trade more, and the economy grows. And we are saying that, in fact, this might not happen because if labor incomes pay the cost for this increase in quote-unquote efficiency or short-term efficiency, then what might happen is that consumption suffers and economic growth suffers in a process that we might call a race to the bottom, that it pushes every country to compete with the other, and because everyone cuts labor costs, then everyone keeps cutting, and this process never ends. And finally, we have employment figures. For the U.S., we foresee 450,000 jobs that will be cut. So a net reduction of employment. For the whole TPP area, we see a 700,000, a job loss of 700,000. Obviously, in the picture of the labor force of the TPP countries and in the picture of the labor force of the U.S., this is very small. But again, it is particularly meaningful that the moment that we do not assume that employment does not change, the moment that we give up on the idea of excluding this effect from the start, then we immediately see an employment loss as an effect of the loss in total economic activity. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So wrapping up, we see TPP generating a series of effects by which the labor costs will bear the burden of the adjustment between countries, and therefore labor incomes will lose part of their cut. And therefore we see a loss of aggregate demand, so that's the total amount of spending, a loss of employment, and we see an acceleration of the global race to the bottom that is this process by which labor incomes tend to be cut more and more, but countries tend to basically pursue each other in this downward spiral. We see, finally, the potential for more financial instability depending on policy responses. In the U.S., we're particularly worried about this, or I am particularly concerned about this, because we saw that in other periods in which labor incomes, or real incomes in general, were being weakened, and that happened in the 90s and into 2000s, and to some extent even in the 80s. But in general, we can say starting in the mid-70s, when the labor share started decreasing, the policy response was to allow people not to support their incomes, but to allow people to get more and more into debt. Now, this was sustainable as long as there were asset prices that grew and, in a way, collateralized people's debts. But as soon as these debts grew too big and were mismanaged as an effect of excessive financial liberalization, then we all know what happened in the mid-2000s. In other words, TPP, from this analysis, does not look like a viable strategy for global economic growth, or doesn't even look like a viable strategy for growth in the U.S. And I think we are pretty much done with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeronim. That was a really sobering look. I see you do have another slide here. Did you want to?
No, it's okay. I think
sure?
it's not. Yeah. I mean, there's no. We've been over it. I'm happy to maybe make some points in the Q&A, but okay. I think we can.
Okay, thank you. That was a sobering message. Obviously, TPP is going to be good for a few very wealthy corporate individuals, but for everyone else, very little impact, except on labor, obviously, which is going to suffer. So anyone with a question, please press *6, and we'll open your mics.
Hi, Jeremy. This is Paul Planter from Rochester, New York. Thank you for being on this call. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Fine.
Not entirely well, but I can hear you. Yep.
I hear a lot of macroeconomic metrics about economic growth. However, are there macroeconomic metrics or limitations to the resource which ultimately put a limitation on growth? If so, what are they?
Okay. So you, if I understand, you're asking me what problem TPP causes for growth?
No. What I'm asking is, it's kind of a more fundamental question than that. There's metrics about growth, but I don't understand how economics appreciates the limitations within the resources that we have.
Okay.
Finite resources. Is there a macroeconomic measures which acknowledge the finiteness of our resources?
Yes. Okay, that's great. That's a great question. It's very important. There are 2 points I would like to make in response to that. My analysis, the analysis I've done with my colleagues, does not deal with that explicitly. This is obviously a limitation, meaning it does not deal explicitly with the resource constraints, especially natural resources constraints. Now, however, these are not absent entirely from the calculations because the finiteness of resources, if one does the calculations properly and looks at the history of this data, these resource constraints do put pressure on our economic performance, and we know that they are one of the factors that hinder economic performance and have hindered economic performance in decades. And so if one looks at the macroeconomy as the organic system that it is, and it takes these factors into account, they are present because obviously they are real. Now, however, we are not in the position with this model that we've used this time to make specific projections about that. There are models, however, that have been looking explicitly into the impact of natural resource constraints on the macroeconomy. In particular, there is a model by Lance Taylor of the New School for Social Research and Duncan Foley, who have been looking at several scenarios and running projections and have been analyzing standard models of the environmental constraints, have found them not particularly credible, and have basically reached the conclusion that we're going to hit a zero growth level sometime in the near future. Now, they do not analyze TPP, but it's just to say that there is now plenty of research in macroeconomics that looks at the impact of natural resource constraints on growth, employment, and income distribution, basically looking at how resource constraints and our current capitalist industrial relationships interact.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks very much. That was a good question.
Our next question will be Adam Weissman. Go ahead.
Hi. So I have a question regarding, and this speaks a little bit to, or somewhat based on the point you were making about the limits of knowledge. I was wondering. So one of the things that, one thing I've been trying to figure out and looking at some of the numbers on TPP is it's fairly easy it's really easy to, in the data that's been presented, to look at balance of trade regarding various commodities between the member nations. Something that I've not seen, and that's of particular interest regarding particularly unsustainable products, is the overall effect TPP may have on net consumption of particular products. Is there any data available to that effect in terms of not just trade balance, but with particular products, either country by country or total, how rate of consumption will be affected by TPP? Just for example, with the ITC report saying that the big winners in terms of U.S. agriculture will be animal agriculture industries. That obviously raises concerns in terms of climate and other environmental impacts, but obviously less so if that's just shifting balance towards more U.S. export, but not necessarily towards a greater overall rate of consumption. So knowing what the overall impact on consumption would be very helpful, and so I'm wondering if there's any way if that data exists, or there's any way to find projections along those lines.
Yeah. I think that those projections that I think we should be careful not to call it data, but those projections exist. And first of all, thank you very much for the question. That's in fact, it's a very important point that it's been raised several times, and I think it kind of highlights the murkiness of some of these calculations. The projections exist because every model that we run, including the ITC model or the Peterson model, which, by the way, are the same, basically, they produce figures also for consumption. Now, the problem is that they aren't very credible because all these figures on consumption are based on the idea that people will earn more money. Employment will be the same. That's full employment. People will earn more money because obviously for a given supply of workers, if there is more business going on, then people will get a higher salary, and therefore they will consume more. So I haven't seen the consumption figures. They might be in the ITC report. I don't remember right now if they are. I don't think they are, but I am pretty sure that if one asks either the Pearson Institute for their consumption figures, the authors, or the ITC economists for their consumption figures, they might supply them because I'm sure that they are favorable to their point. The question, though, is why would consumption increase? And the answer is the consumption increases because incomes increase in that narrative, and it increases because every threat to its stability or to its constant growth is removed by assumption. So the question really isn't. It's important to understand what happens there, but it's also important to understand why we see these figures. Because when we see incomes growing, and that's what's been widely advertised in these studies, then we know that consumption is growing as well, because this income is accruing to some people. But the question, the real trick is, why are these incomes growing in a world in which there's no market that is really expanding? There are no workers whose cut is really increasing. And so why would we expect this? Why are we seeing the globalization keeps having these beneficial effects? And the answers are these assumptions that remove these risks, plus a number of ad hoc features like the idea that FDI would increase very much and that also would magically benefit the economy and similar things like that.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, next speaker, Lisa. Your line is open.
Okay, this is Lisa in New York, and I was just wondering if you have been able to present your findings to the House and Senate, and if not, why not?
I haven't presented these findings to the House and Senate. I spoken with I've had contacts with a number of members, representatives, and a couple of senators. But at some point we talked back in February. In February, we talked about maybe having a little presentation for the staff, but in the end it didn't happen. I think we couldn't find a good day in that week when I was in D.C. Somehow it didn't. Yeah, it fell through.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay, thank you.
And, hi there. Hey, Shirley, this is Squirrely, to quote a late-period Nutty Squirrel song. But in serious terms, my parents are stockbrokers, and they might be blind to these negative side effects. How do you educate them? How do you educate them as to the negative effect it would have in their wallet in the language that the 1% would understand?
I'm afraid I'm not a good expert in educating parents. I haven't succeeded with mine yet, but I can try. I think an issue that if we're talking with well-meaning people who just see, privilege other aspects of economic reality, such as business and or financial markets over industrial relationships and labor, I think what's important to explain is how these things are related. So there is a connection. There is a strong connection between what happens on the financial markets and the money that can be made on the financial markets and what happens in the real economy. But this connection is not mechanical. So something that happens, especially in the U.S., is that when we compress people's incomes, then policymakers need to do something about it, because otherwise the social compact breaks down. And we have phenomena like the 1%, like the no global, and other worse things. And policymakers have two ways of doing that. They can introduce policies that support real incomes, for example, minimum wage policies or policies that create employment actively, and things that have been done many other times in the past, or support a social compact that helps a rebalancing of income distribution, things like that. They could do that. Or they can take a shortcut, and instead of supporting people's incomes, they try to help people support just their consumption without giving them the income. And that's basically what's been done since the mid-'70s by letting people run up more and more debt. Now, this debt, when it grows and people find themselves with more and more debt, this debt ends up being managed in the by financial firms, and they can make a lot of money with this. So that's great for them, except at some point the music stops and the whole thing falls down, and it hurts a lot of people. Now, what happens is that in the aftermath of these crises, then we typically see a lot of requests for legislation that just limits the freedom of the people that work in the financial market. And a lot of this legislation makes a lot of sense. A lot of this legislation doesn't make a lot of sense. There's a lot of legislation that is needed, but there are a lot of requests that would not resolve much. It's not to say that we shouldn't have them, it's to say that we should have the good ones. So it seems to me that if anyone who works in the financial market is interested in their long-term gains, then they should understand that they must find a way to support the economy's long-term performance. But I've never really met a lot of people in the financial market who are really interested in their long-term gains.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
My question is whether your model can take into account sort of, replacement mercantilism or strategic behavior, currency manipulation, industrial subsidies, state-owned enterprises, things that other countries do in their national interest to game the system, and can your model take into account any of that, or can any model? What do you have to say on that?
Yes and no. Everything that happens in our economic reality, everything that happens in the world is somehow influencing the estimates we make with our data and with our models. Because when we try to estimate the relationship between GDP and employment, or employment and consumption, and we come up with parameters, with figures that say, let's say, every percentage point increase in GDP leads to half a percentage point increase in employment. Whenever we come up with these estimates, these things are influenced by a lot of things that we know, because we really explicitly look for them, and a lot of things we don't know. And so all the factors you mentioned, because they are impactful, then they are relevant. So they are somehow all accounted for, except we don't know exactly, in many cases, the specific contribution of each of them. And so in our model, for example, none of those factors that you explained appear explicitly. So one thing that worries me, for example, is that part of the discussion on the economic effects of TPP is about the impact that something like ISDS, or investment liberalization, financial liberalization, might have on investment. And we don't know this. Now, the TPP advocates make a bunch of assumptions that basically whose purpose is to argue that investment will just soar. And I don't find that convincing, but we don't have an explicit way to analyze that yet. And I think we're better off not venturing into doing that if we don't have a convincing and clear story to tell, because we know it's reflected in the data, but although we don't know exactly how. I'm sorry, I can't give you a better answer. I wish I could.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you. Okay, let's go to Alan. Your line is open.
Hi. I have a question concerning the fact that all of the job losses appear to be fairly uniform. There seems to be an even distribution of all in one of the graphs there, job losses in TPP and non-TPP countries. And you had also mentioned that there was likely to be zero economic growth in the near future. I'd like to find out if you have looked at how to create some kind of a standard for acceptance of the right of countries to do labor organizing in the light of that, in the light of the fact that the projection for employment seems to be down. Are there ways of applying the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the covenants on economic, social, political rights to getting decision makers in all of these countries able to understand the right of people to economic self-determination and the right of communities to economic self-determination, and bearing in mind that that principle was developed as consensus during the height of the Cold War between 1948 and 1966. If they were able to develop an understanding that communities have the right to economic self-determination, then what is the problem these days? Why are we having a problem with that right now?
Thank you. I wish I had an obvious answer to that. My view is that, well, it's complex. In a way, I think we're having a problem with that right now, and we didn't have it 30 or 40 years ago. I think one of the explanations is that because Cold War has ended, there is less pressure for economic elites to concede and to be more progressive, because they don't fear that the less privileged people or the poor people or the those that live on their wages might join ideologies that they feel are more dangerous. So that there's a historical explanation that's being put forward for sure. But there is also the issue that there is a strong, there has been a strong cultural hegemony of the neoliberal thinking that has just persuaded a ton of people that if you want to create jobs and you want to create economic progress and support opportunities, then what you have to do is you have to liberalize everything you can. And if you liberalize, everything will be good. But it is a myopic vision because you know that everything will be good in one place for one moment, but then the moment that everybody does it, then the advantages that are only relative to one another then will disappear, will be wiped out, because the moment that any other country improves a little bit their economic condition and their ability to produce, they steal business from someone else, so that erases the advantage that the first country has had. And in other words, we find ourselves in a world in which we're only going down. And I think, so I'm only saying this because in a way there is the ideology issue, but I think there is also the issue that people haven't been educated to see how these policies, especially when they're applied on a global scale, but also on a national scale for a country like the U.S., they end up being counterproductive. I think a lot of people believe that if you cut labor cost, you create jobs, because it is an argument that it appeals to the common sense. I mean, everyone. I think it really boils down to this. Everyone will believe that if you cut labor cost, if you accept it, if you make it allowed and legal that people might earn less money or maybe don't get any Social Security or any of that, then some business will hire them, and that's probably true. Except what they would it's harder to grasp because it's the second step, is that if everybody does it, then workers will not have money to spend. If they don't have money to spend, businesses will have no demand to face and to hire for. And so it ends up being a vicious circle. And that doesn't appeal to common sense as much, but it's a very real fact. And I think people that have a hard time making ends meet, they do understand it very much. But everyone who has a business is constantly facing the issue of costs. Then they end up being entirely absorbed with this. I think it's important to just call the attention on the second degree effect of these policies.
Thank you very much. And that's going to have to be our last question for tonight with Jeronim. Sorry, there were a few people left in the queue, but we've got to let Jeronim go. It's about 2:30 a.m. in Switzerland, and he's got to get up and go to work in the morning. So thank you so much, Jeronim. We really appreciate your coming on our webinar. And
thank you, guys. I look forward to hearing from you in the future. Yep. You have a good day. A good evening.
Thank you
Bye.
very much. Bye-bye. Next slide, please. Great. Thanks very much. Our next speaker is Celeste Drake, Trade and Globalization Policy Specialist with the AFL-CIO. And Celeste is going to be giving us a rundown on the analysis of the International Trade Commission report. So welcome, Celeste.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. Could you move to the next slide, please? Okay, so this really follows directly from Jeronim's work and the Tufts study. So just to provide some background, his study came out, I believe, as he said, was in February of this year, but the United States International Trade Commission, usually abbreviated ITC or sometimes US ITC, finished just last month on May 18th their statutorily required analysis of the TPP using the same economic model as the Peterson Institute. So it's called the CGE, or Computable General Equilibrium Model. You don't need to remember that acronym unless you're really interested. What it means, though, is it's this model, as he was describing. It holds many things constant in order to see what the impacts of some changes will be. And it's not, there's not a problem generally with doing this kinds of thing in mathematics or economics or anytime we're using statistics, because often you have a system that's so complex, it's hard to piece out the effects that you want to see without holding other effects constant. However, this CGE model has been used to project the outcomes of trade agreements for so long, for the last 20, 30, 40 years, and it's actually proved to be quite inaccurate in a number of respects. So what happens is you take a model, you think it might be the best mathematical model to project what you're trying to look at. The data comes back in and says, in virtually every case it's wrong, and it's wrong in a particular direction, meaning it always overprojects the jobs that are going to be created, the income growth for workers, the positive effects. Then what you need to do as a scientist rather than an ideologue is say, we've got to update our model, we've got to change our model, and this is what Jeronim and his team did for the Tufts study. It's unfortunate and says something about the U.S. government's trade policy and the others using these projections that they're not willing to change their models based on the evidence, that they're continuing with the same model. So that's really what, when we look at what the ITC report says, we have to say it's using this bad model. So it's not, the model does not take into account the more expensive medicines, the weaker regulations, the global corporate power that's created by investor-to-state dispute settlement, none of that, and it just keeps going along down this merry road of nothing happens to employment will be stable, trade balances will be stable, jobs will be created, because even though we won't have an overall change in the unemployment rate, you're going to have more jobs because we're creating efficiencies, and efficiencies create more jobs. So, and while they're holding trade balances stable, what we see is because the U.S. already has such a terrible trade balance with many of these countries that our deficit actually gets worse because it's relatively stable. Mathematically, it's actually worse. So next slide, please. Okay, so even given that, so even though we've already talked about the model doesn't work, there are things that it doesn't take into account at all, and there are other things that it holds artificially stable, even though we know they won't be. All of these things have gone wrong, and then you still see that its potential upside is tiny. It's so tiny, if you blink, you will miss it. And this is a big, big deal, because we keep being pitched the TPP as a growth engine. It will create jobs. This is how we grow our economy. But even those who back it up say, well, this is how much it's going to grow our economy. It's going to grow our economy 0.15%, not 15%, not 1.5%, 0.15%, only after 15 years. That is so tiny. As Dean Baker of CPER has pointed out, that's the equivalent of saying the U.S. economy is going to be as big in 2032 January as it would otherwise have been in 2032 February. Okay? And if you look at other ways to grow our economy, like a recent International Monetary Fund study on investing in infrastructure, and the International Monetary Fund is not a progressive organization, it is not a left organization, so it is not somebody that I would normally be citing. It says if we invest 1% of our GDP in infrastructure, including all these examples, high-speed internet, airports, rail, ports, and research centers, things that actually would help the U.S. be able to trade better, we could grow our economy by 3% in 3 years. So why aren't we looking at that? We aren't looking at that because there are vested interests in those pressing for the TPP model of, quote-unquote, growth. But it's really the TPP model of economic governance. Next slide, please. So this is just a chart that shows you, to verify what I've been saying about all the ITC projections being wrong, it charts the U.S. trade deficit, and the deficit's getting larger as the blue line goes down, right? You can see the negative numbers on the left axis. And then it's charted against major new U.S. trade agreements. So the Tokyo round of the GATT, that was a round of tariff cutting. The NAFTA, the URAA, that basically means the creation of the WTO, the Uruguay round agreements. Then China joining the WTO, then the U.S.-Korea. You see one spike where it seemed to be getting better. But if you look at when that was, 2008, 2009, that was the global financial meltdown. And why it was getting better is because we Americans were buying less from abroad because a lot of people were frankly out of work and out of their homes. Next slide, please. Okay, so here on this slide shows exactly what Jeronim was talking about. The setup of these trade agreements is all of these countries are competing for the same jobs and investment. And as they're competing for jobs and investment, they're doing things that are going to increase returns to capital so that they can draw that investment. So they're promising to investors, in other words, we'll give you low taxes. Oh, that other country promised low taxes, so we'll make ours lower. We're going to give you low wages. Oh, that other country has low wages. What can we do to make ours lower? This kind of thing is happening. And so as you see, returns to labor and returns to capital, kind of largely ran together, sometimes up, sometimes down, over the course of the post-World War II U.S. economy. And then you see a huge split after 2002, so Bush era came in. Not that everything was perfect before that, as Jeronim explained, but we see the big problem after that and where we are now, which is farther apart than anything else shown here. And that's because wages are being pushed down. U.S. workers are being put into closer competition with workers who have no rights on the job, no labor inspectors to come verify that they're being paid minimum wages, all of those things. And that money is still being created. Workers are creating wealth, but it's not going to them. It's going to the top 1% and the global corporations. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is just another way of showing similar information to what you saw in the last graph and what I and Jeronim have been saying. You had productivity and wages go up generally together from post-World War II to the early 70s. Then you had a break. So lots of things are going into this trend. It's not just these particular trade agreements. It's how U.S. labor law is being interpreted and implemented. It's how these sort of, when he talks about flexibilities, it's what kinds of protections you have on the job so that workers lose bargaining power, so that workers are often forced into, temp jobs and so-called independent contractor jobs and all of these threats of offshoring, even when the offshoring doesn't actually happen. All of these things reduce the ability of workers to negotiate that their pay goes up when their production goes up, and we have that big separation. So again, that wealth is being created. It's just not going to average working families. And working families, as Jeronim really explained, still want to have that American dream, that better life, so a lot of times they're making up this loss of income with additional credit. Next slide, please. Okay, and workers, they realize, small businesses, farmers, ranchers, a lot of us, faith communities, environmentalists, we're in alignment here. This is not the model of globalization that we want. It's not that we don't want globalization. It's not that we don't want to buy coffee or sell, computers abroad or whatever it is, but it is about what are the rules that guide it and whose rights do we protect. And do we protect all rights equally, or do we put investor rights first? Those kinds of things. So in the end, when you look at the tiny growth that was predicted by the US ITC on the TPP, and you look at all the reasons that prediction is wrong, what I use as a talking point is the TPP probably won't even end up creating enough growth to pay for all the airfare and hotels for the negotiators. So the ITC report essentially proves they're going to use it to pitch it. It proves the TPP is a bad deal. Next slide, please. And again, this is just showing that people are united for fair trade and trade justice, and they have been, and this has been working. The fact that the TPP has not come up for a vote yet is due to the work of all the folks on this call. So thanks for your work, and we need to keep going. Next slide, please. Okay, there we go.
Great. All right. That was great, Celeste, as usual. So if you all have a question for Celeste, press *6 on your phone, and we'll put you in the queue. Okay. We have a caller, 303. Your line is open.
Hi, I'm Vicki from Colorado.
Hi, Vicki.
I have a really perhaps simple-minded question that I'm trying to figure out. So, you know, if you're listening to mainstream media and the campaign and everything else, the primary question, to my frustration, because there are so many, you know, jaw-dropping issues involved in the TPP, is jobs. Jobs. And yet these models are holding that parameter constant. Can you help me wrap my head around this?
Yes. So Vicki, that's a great question. So when it's saying it's holding employment constant, what it's holding constant is the rate of employment or unemployment. So what they're saying is the U.S. economy will grow and more jobs will be created, so that's sort of absolute jobs. They're saying there will absolutely be a higher number of jobs, but what they're holding constant is the unemployment rate. So just to give you an example, and this is not what they're predicting because the numbers aren't that large, but it'll just make sense. If we had 10 workers in our economy and 9 had jobs, we'd have a 10% unemployment rate. If our economy were to grow, but we wanted to hold that 10% rate constant, what we could say is our economy now has 20 jobs, 18 people, or has 20 people in the labor market, but 18 are employed, and we'd still have a 10% unemployment rate. So do you see like that? So when they say it's held constant, they still are going to predict a certain amount of job growth. And what they've predicted for the TPP is 128,000 jobs in 15 years. So if you think about that, that's not even a good monthly job creation. So when the monthly job numbers come out and we're looking at what's happening to the actual unemployment rate in the U.S., not these sort of predictions monthly, what we're looking for a good job month, you'd want to see a minimum of like 175,000 jobs. Really what you'd want to see is something over 200,000 jobs. That means the economy is growing at a fast clip. We're creating 200,000 jobs a month. So by saying that in their view, the TPP will create 128,000 jobs over 15 years, it's not very substantially different from having no impact at all. So when they say, and that's their numbers, that's not Jeronim's numbers or anybody, that's the pro-TPP numbers. But what they're holding constant is they're saying it won't substantially impact the rate. And then if you get deeper into what they're doing, what they're saying is jobs will change. People will lose jobs because they admit we'll be outcompeted in terms of some exports, but we'll have a lot of growth in other exports, right? And so, again, they make a fake assumption that says every worker who loses a job finds another job that pays the same or better immediately. And we all know that that's fake. Nobody gets fired on Thursday and gets a new job at the same or better pay on Friday. So again, what they're assuming away for simplicity is transition costs. That's what they call it, like the 6 months that you're unemployed. That's called the transition cost. And when they assume it away, that means for all the people that are actually impacted, it's as if the economic hurt doesn't happen to them. But we know, again, from reality, that a lot of times what happens is the jobs that leave are the good family wage jobs that were probably in a unionized factory, and folks go through retraining, they try to get a new job, and they often get stuck in a lower end service job where they permanently lose income over a lifetime. They were at a family wage, and now they're probably at a wage that would hold them pretty good as a single person, but not as a family. So these are the kinds of things that are assumed away.
Yeah, they're
Great.
just begging the question.
Much. What's that?
It seems like they're begging a major question that everybody has about these agreements. They're replacing analysis with assumption.
Yeah, well,
in part. I mean, it's complicated, but
yeah, and you have to for some extent. So Jeronim's study has assumptions in it too, but his main model is based on what has actually happened in the global economy for the past 20 years. So the assumptions in Jeronim's study are about what's been the effect of these agreements and how has it created a race to the bottom. And so from our view at the AFL-CIO representing working families, we think using assumptions that are based on real economic impact rather than a model that frankly was created 200 years ago by an economist, David Ricardo, that's probably where we should be. And so, yes, I think their numbers and their arguments are pretty faulty. The problem is that your average American voter isn't really, they're not on tonight's call. They're not ensconced in these issues, and they don't necessarily know how to fight. They know the numbers don't sound great, or they know they don't really trust that the TPP will probably be good for them or their family, but it's hard to push back on things when you don't have the details, and the folks that are selling it, frankly, act like they have more answers than they do. So this is part of the reason we do these calls, is so folks feel more confident and they can give that pushback and they can tell their friends and neighbors because that's really what it takes. And we think that our story is consistent with their lived experience. And so they'll say, I get what you're saying because, that's how I view free trade. So it's helpful the more that you can talk to others about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Next caller, you're 248. Your line is, oops, I just lost 248. Sorry about that.
Hello. Hi.
Okay.
Hello?
Is this Alan?
It is, yes. Just had a quick question for Celeste. Celeste, I'm just wondering if you could tell me if the AFL-CIO has got any idea on how much of a commitment Hillary Clinton has to economic democracy.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I will say Hillary Clinton, she's not the same candidate as Bernie Sanders, and our affiliate unions were split, until the primaries were over, and just came out, the affiliates came and asked the AFL-CIO, which is a federation, so we do what our affiliates ask, asked us to endorse her. Now, she is in the right place on the TPP, saying that she's in opposition to it, and she has called out some specific issues that we share as being some of the weaknesses of the TPP, that it doesn't address currency manipulation, that it has weak rules of origin. She's called out the higher prices on medicines, and she's actually said that ISDS, has special rights for corporations that labor and environmental groups don't get. So all of those things are good. Now, I think if you look back at kind of the fact that she was in on the TPP when she was part of the administration, that she's voted, for and against trade agreements when she was senator. There are reasons that folks, may not trust where she is on trade, and that's fair. I think it's our job as voters, unless we want to be voting for Donald Trump, which hopefully I think a lot of folks on this call wouldn't want to do. I certainly personally wouldn't. People can make up their own minds. But to push, if Hillary Clinton is the candidate that better represents your view, it's our responsibility as voters to push her to make sure that she stays where she says she is, that she becomes stronger on trade, and that she does better on trade. And I think that's, in terms of the AFL-CIO's point of view, that's how the AFL-CIO looks at it. Unfortunately, we don't have a Labor Party in this country, and to the extent that the AFL-CIO endorses any particular candidate or supports any particular candidate, we always have a job in front of us to push that candidate to be the best candidate they can be, and if they get into office, to push that person to be the best representative of working people's interests that they can be. And so we have to take up that challenge, and we're going to do that with Hillary Clinton on trade and a number of issues. So thanks for the question.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks, Alan. Let's see. Okay, I think this is you, Joe.
All right.
Your line is open. Yes.
All right. Hello, everybody. My question is this. A couple of months ago, North Carolina put out a report that said that they're going to lose half the jobs in the state to automation. And 3 or 4 weeks ago, the state of Tennessee said we're going to lose 1.4 million jobs in the state of Tennessee due to automation, leaving us with the other 50%. Now, at the rate we're going to lose jobs due to automation, what impact is this fight that we're doing going to have on what's left? Thank you.
Yeah, so there are a number of things that are threatening jobs for U.S. workers and folks in manufacturing more generally across the world, and automation is certainly one of them. So, I would say one thing, don't get caught in the trap where people will tell you we're only losing manufacturing jobs to automation. Trade has nothing to do with it, because A, that's false. B, if it were true, then manufacturing jobs would be shrinking everywhere in every country in the world as they all automated. But in fact, they are growing in some places, which means automation isn't the only thing, and it's not just killing jobs, it's also helping jobs grow. And 3, an economist, and I forget now where he is, but I'm typing his name into the chat box, who had been kind of on the automation is killing jobs train, just did a great study about U.S. trade with China and the fact that it's not just automation that's killing jobs. It is trade with China, and in particular, the job losses that we had with China were over 3 million, and the cuts were strong and deep, and workers were not able to transition right away into equivalent jobs. So it's a pretty good study. Now, that's something else that's wrong with our economy, and we're going to have to think about ways to change it. So when automation comes in, for instance, our economy currently treats it as all gains go to the boss. In other words, the boss owns the equipment, they take the gains, and the workers take the losses. We take all the risk by being fired through automation. It doesn't have to be that way. In other countries, if you look at France, say, what they've done is automation has taken more jobs. They've changed their laws so that now 35 hours is a full work week and the same pay as 40 hours was. So in other words, as they need you less to have the same productivity, the worker gets the gain because they get a few more hours of leisure. Now, it's hard to imagine how we would institute that in the U.S. because workers as a class have been beleaguered and without political power for a long time, and capital seems to be very powerful. But again, we have to take it on ourselves to to take collective action, to have creative ideas, to get our elected officials to listen to us, to work ourselves outside the electoral process, all of these ways to institute the other solutions and not just say, well, it has to be the workers that are always bearing the brunt. So great question, and I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for you.
Great, thanks. Sorry, everybody, that was our last question. Really glad to hear your what you talked about with as far as automation goes. It's really important. And also, I'm sure all our participants are looking forward to getting their hands on the AFL-CIO's ITC analysis. So at the end, maybe now you can tell us how, unfortunately, we can't, apparently links are blocked in the chat box tonight. So is there a way for our audience to get the analysis? Celeste?
Oh, sorry. So we have a short document that does a great critique of the ITC's points that people should know and use in their talking points. And I've been asking for it to be posted on our website, and the web team didn't respond to me this week. But if you go to our website next week, which is aflcio.org/issues/trade, you will find it on the TPP page amongst a lot of other resources, but I will make sure that that is posted by next week.
Beautiful. I like it because it's only 4 pages, and it's very informative, and it is a great tool to bring to your legislators. So thanks very much, Celeste. Next slide, please. Beautiful. Our next speaker is Dr. Margaret Flowers. Margaret is the co-director of Popular Resistance and Flush the TPP. And welcome, Margaret.
Great. Thank you for having me. So I'm just going to share a few things with you about what's going on now with resistance. If we could go to the next slide. There. Okay. So actually this is an old campaign that we built, but it's appropriate for tonight because we built it around the U.S. International Trade Commission report, and you'll see there is a link on the slide to the People's EIS TPP, which is a People's Economic Impact Statement for the TPP, which was based on the Tufts study and some of the work that Celeste Drake did. And so that has a full People's EIS as well as a 2-pager that you can download and bring to your member of Congress. And then on the Tools for Education page, you'll find a section that has all the various responses to the U.S. International Trade Commission impact statement. Let's go to the next slide. What I want to share with you is some of the events that are going on this summer to build up towards the fall when we need to stop the TPP from being ratified during the lame duck session of Congress after the fall. And one action is at the right before the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, there's going to be a March for a Clean Energy Revolution on Sunday, July 24th, the day before the DNC starts. And we have an official Stop the TPP contingent in that march. And so if you're going to be in Philly or if you're close by and you can make it, please come and march with us. We're going to have some great art pieces and banners and things to carry. We'll probably do an art build the night before. And if you want to get involved with organizing this, we do regular calls each Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern. You can just contact me through the event page on Facebook. The link is there. Or you can contact me directly through email at info, I-N-F-O, at popularresistance.org. And I'll put that into the chat in just a minute. And get involved with that. And then also coming up this summer, which was just announced, is a Rock the TPP music tour that's being put together by Evan Greer of Fight for the Future. And the first concert starts on July 23rd in Denver, Colorado. Tom Morello is going to be there. And then it's proceeding up around the West Coast, and then after that, hopefully there'll be some stops in the Midwest and on the East Coast, perhaps even finishing in Washington, D.C. around the time that we are gearing up to fight the lame duck session. So I'm looking to see what the website is for that, and I will get that. Oh, it's just ROCK, R-O-C-K, against the TPP.org. And if you want to get involved, they're going to be doing, in addition to the concerts, around each of the concerts, there will be an action training and an action. So if you're interested, check that website out, see if there's one coming near you, and get involved. Let's go to the next slide. Are you there? Great. Okay. So this is the No Lame Duck Uprising. And what we're doing right now is encouraging people to sign up for the No Lame Duck Uprising. We have over 2,000 people that have signed up so far, and we're hoping to build that into the tens of thousands by November. And just having those numbers alone, being able to say 10,000 people I know are committed to stopping the TPP from being ratified this fall, is a deterrent in itself. What we're asking people to do right now, in addition to signing up and spreading the word, is to use a tool that was created with our friends at Fight for the Future called fightthetpp.org. And when you go to that website, it's just geared towards a tool that helps you email your member of Congress or call them. And we're asking people to do that every Tuesday. Use Fight the TPP for TPP Tuesdays. Call your member of Congress. Insist that if they are against the TPP, great. They should be doing more, like speaking out against it. If they're on the fence, they really need to declare themselves. There's no reason why they can't do that at this point. The text is available. And if they're against it, really push on them to change their position. But we're really calling for no vote on the TPP during the lame duck. It's a very anti-democratic time of Congress when the members who have lost their seats or are retiring are not accountable to the people. And large controversial agreements like the TPP should not be ratified during a time like that. Now, if it looks like the lame duck is moving forward, then we will be organizing protests to start in Washington, D.C. on November 14th. That's the day that Congress comes back, and we'll be there for that week. And then the following, right after that, they'll be home in their districts for 10 days. So if you can't make it to Washington, you can organize something during those 10 days. And then if we need to come back to Washington, we'll do that as well. So please do sign up at flushthetpp.org. No Lame Duck. You'll see the link just below the image in that slide. Use fightthetpp.org each week and spread the word. There are flyers that you can download from that No Lame Duck link, as well as sign-up sheets. We have a few people that have been going out physically to meetings and things and signing people up, and that's been a great way to recruit people for this. So let's really organize and put the pressure on this fall and stop the TPP from being ratified. I think that's everything. Oh, the final thing, sorry. We do our every other week TPP resistance call. You're welcome to join that, and actually Evan Greer will be on the call this Wednesday to talk about the ROCK against the TPP, and you'll find that on our Flush the TPP website. Under News, the News section, it's at the very top of the page, how you can sign up for those calls. They're every other Wednesday night, and this Wednesday is when we're having a call, June 22nd. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Margaret. Next slide. Margaret, will you be able to stay on for Q&A after Adam?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. All right. Adam Wiseman is with Global Justice for Animals and the Environment. He is a major player on our Trade Justice Alliance team. Adam, your line is open.
Okay, so starting with this week's news reports. So these reports are excerpted mostly from the Trade Justice Alliance newsletter, which is actually not up on the website yet for this week, but shortly after the call will be going up. You can always find the newsletter, which is a list of highlight news stories for the week, often also action reports, upcoming events announcements, etc., by going to tradejustice.net/news. This week's report was actually compiled primarily by Susie Chasnoff, who is going to be one of several volunteers who's going to be helping to compile our news reports in the weeks and months to come. So thank you, Susie, for that. Moving on to this week's TPP stories. There's a new article about the American Cancer Society's rather unfortunate support for TPP. They're happy that TPP prevents the tobacco industry from using that agreement to bring investor-state cases. However, TPP does not prevent the tobacco industry from benefiting from the trade agreement in other ways, including using regulatory cooperation. So Ellen Schaefer of the Center for Policy Analysis has written an article critiquing that position, which ultimately will be negative to efforts to curb tobacco use. Moving on to the, I guess we're not moving to the next slide. I'll just keep going with stories. Moving on then. So we heard a little bit before about questions about Hillary Clinton and her level of commitment to opposing TPP. And there are three stories in the last few weeks that really raise the question about how sincere Hillary Clinton is in this position and how much at this point is an attempt to whitewash her positions for political reasons. First, the State Department, and this is less of something we can directly pin on Hillary, but it raises questions. The State Department is refusing to release Hillary Clinton-era TPP emails from her time at State until after the election. This is in response to a long overdue response to a Freedom of Information Act request by the International Business Times' David Sirota. The state has been grossly overdue in responding to that request, and they've now said that despite the fact that it's already long past time based on both the legally mandated and their own average time for responding, they're going to further punt on putting those emails out until they, in effect, cannot be politically costly to Hillary in this election. The Trump campaign responded almost immediately with Donald Trump saying that the TPP emails should be released before the election. And around the exact same time, it's become clear that the paperback edition of Hillary's book, Hard Choices, omits 2 pages about the TPP that at this point are politically embarrassing for her. So the Sierra Club, in a news story, has released a letter signed by more than 450 organizations saying that TPP threatens to keep fossil fuels in the ground, and that letter can be found on their website and will be, along with all these stories, in the newsletter that will be going up shortly after the call. And I will also, because you can't see them now, I will, in the news section, put up a link to the slides that I'm pulling this information from so that you can see all the pictures that you would otherwise be seeing. My colleague Pete Dolak at Trade Justice New York Metro has written a news story that has appeared in The Ecologist, also in Counterpunch, on regulation of the financial services industry and how it will be undermined if the Trade in Services Agreement passes, TISA being, of course, the services-related trade agreement in negotiation with over 50 countries. And finally, moving on to the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, Senate Finance Chair Orrin Hatch says that if TPP fails this year, it dooms the prospect for TTIP in 2016. However, it's his view that TTIP negotiations are not going to be completed either way in 2016, which of course directly contradicts what USTR and the chief European negotiator were saying about TTIP just a few weeks ago. There's a new coalition of financial services companies that are pushing for inclusion of TTIP, of financial services in TTIP, which of course should be of concern because what they'll be pushing is an agenda of financial industry deregulation. Moving on to the World Trade Organization, China is supporting India's WTO challenge to U.S. visa fees and other visa fees from and regulations from the U.S., European Union, and Canada. And finally, the WTO members are eyeing preparations for enacting the Trade Facilitation Agreement, which is the first new global trade agreement that will be covered by under the WTO in years. Saudi Arabia just became the second Middle East country to join to join the Trade Facilitation Agreement, and definitely a topic we should cover in greater detail on future calls so that we can better understand the implications of this agreement. Finally, for now, we heard before from Margaret about the Energy March that's going to be taking place during the Democratic National Convention. Global Justice for Animals and the Environment is going to be organizing a group within the TPP contingent focusing on palm oil. That's something that we've heard about on these calls in recent weeks, and we'll be revisiting again. The palm oil trade, as many of us know, is not only a threat to rainforests and wildlife, but is also despite the fact that palm oil is marketed as a clean biofuel, is actually a significant contributor to climate change. It is actually net GHG impact a worse fuel than many fossil fuels, and is also linked to forced labor and the displacement of indigenous communities. Malaysia hopes to increase exports of palm oil as a result of TPP, with TPP eliminating import tariffs on palm oil. So one of the sustainable energy and energy justice issues that we need to be addressing when talking about TPP is palm oil. So the Global Justice for Animals and the Environment is going to be organizing an orangutan troop in this march to speak out against palm oil and the TPP. So if you would like to be an orangutan, you can learn more by going to gjae.org/724. Be an orangutan to speak out for some of the many wildlife species threatened by this agreement. Again, that's gjae.org/724 for the orangutan troop at the march in Philly. So that's it for now. I'll be rejoining you at the end of the call to talk about one of our upcoming webinars. And again, please check tradejustice.net/news. Probably by about an hour after the call, I will have these slides up as well as the full newsletter for you to read. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Adam, can you stick around with Margaret just in case anyone has a question for you?
Sure. Is Mara joining us as well, or is she?
Margaret.
Okay.
Margaret. Yeah, Mara will be coming on after Rose, actually.
Oh, okay, great.
If anyone has a question for either Margaret or Adam, press *6.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine.
Okay, yeah, my question was, maybe Margaret or Adam can answer, because I was going to ask Jeremy, how did he arrive at the figure of 700,000 jobs being lost, as far as the unemployment or the employment situation? How did he arrive at that figure?
That might be a question that Celeste may be better equipped to answer than. Right. I won't speak for Margaret, but certainly better than I would be. But so maybe if Celeste is still on, we can bring her back to speak to that.
Are you still
sure,
with
I can.
Celeste? Right.
So he's using the figures based on what has happened globally with globalization, which is that it's actually not a job creation model. It's a returns to capital model. So companies will do whatever they can to hire the fewest number of workers possible, either through automations or other productivity increases. So he's looking at what has happened to job creation and wages and returns to capital and all these things globally and plugging those figures in. And if you look, it's consistent with results of prior trade deals for the U.S. So the U.S. lost about 700,000 jobs from NAFTA. As I said before, 3.2 million from China joining the WTO, about 96,000, something on that order from the Korea agreement. So just given the size of the agreement, the figures that he was plugging in, that's the projection. But you can get, if you actually read his study, and we'll make sure that there's a link. I'll post a link in the chat box, and maybe it'll come up when this gets posted on YouTube. You can go to his study, and he actually explains it pretty well what their numbers are based on, and why is it that he created the numbers that he did.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Celeste. Kit, your line is open.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. There you
go. Okay. Well, I was also trying to include, I don't know if you can do it, but to include Hal Suter on. He and I just got back from the Texas Democratic Convention, and our participation there as fair trade. For fair trade, we started out on Thursday evening talking about and distributing information about the TPP and just kind of trying to rile people up about Stop the TPP and No Lame Duck, and just explaining a little bit about that, much like Margaret has just described to us. And then on Friday, we doubled the 2014's attendance to about 400 at the Fair Trade Caucus. We had representatives from Popular Resistance and Sierra Club and various labor organizations and so forth, and the whole thing was about opposing the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And we shared a lot of educational information on Bernie Sanders and on Hillary Clinton and on Donald Trump and their trade stances and so forth with the people there. And I'm working off of my notes that I wrote on the way in tonight. We distributed a bibliography of articles about Trump's, since he hasn't put out anything that I know of on his stances about the TPP. And also a number of other things from AFL-CIO. We had top 10 unknown things about the TPP. So a lot of educational materials. And also we use that great ITC report, a graphic, did a flyer, two-sided flyer, one talking about the kind of boiling down some of the things that Celeste was just reporting on from the ITC, and then also combining that on the flip side with the flyer, the No Lame Duck flyer from Margaret, so to give people action to take, and to do between now, starting now, really emphasizing that we need to be working on toward a no lame duck through the end of the year, and really emphasizing that to everyone. And let me see what else we were. Excuse me. So we also, very importantly, it may have been the first time ever that we adopted an opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership on our state platform. And apparently we've got everything that we asked for on that. So that was huge. We also, just as a couple of sidelights, we voted to reduce the number of superdelegates from 20% to 10%. We had a very strong support for an amendment to reduce them to 0%, but that ultimately failed. So with that, we were able to get a lot of good information out opposing the TPP, and we'll continue doing that here in Texas. And thank y'all for your time.
Great. Thanks, Kit, for your great work in Texas. Beautiful. To our next speaker, Rose Espinola. She is the National Field Director for Public Citizens Global Trade Watch. This is the first time we have the new National Field Director on our call, so we're really excited. She first started organizing with El Movimiento Estudiantil Chicanx de Aztlán, and since 2008, she has been a core organizer on successful campaigns ranging from unionization fights to fossil fuel divestment. Most recently, Rose managed Planned Parenthood's Latinx Field Program and served as Virginia State Field Director for the Bernie campaign. Welcome, Rose.
Thanks. So I have three things. The first is an update from the Hill. I'm going to talk about some localized job loss reports we've been doing, and then I'll let you all know how you can help with the Rock Against the TPP concert. So the biggest update coming out of the Hill over the last week was that on Tuesday, the Ways and Means Committee had a hearing that was specifically focused on trade and jobs. And it's the first in a series of hearings, and they had 5 witnesses from agriculture, specifically representing producers of dairy, pork, and horticulture products. And then they also had representatives for the craft brewer industry and from the American Farm Bureau Federation. What is of note here is that Representative Ringel actually suggested that there are not currently enough votes in Congress to move the TPP to pass. And he went so far to say that the TPP would have to, he's suggesting that the TPP be partnered with an infrastructure package in order to get it through. So this is good news coming out of the Hill. The second update that I have is connected to Celeste's presentation on the ITC report, the U.S. International Trade Commission report. So what we've been doing at Public Citizens Global Trade Watch is we've been building out localized reports for some key states that show how many jobs would be lost at the state level. And we're specifically looking at key industries in the states that we have some members of Congress that aren't moving. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you all is how you can get involved with organizing around the Rock Against TPP concert. The first concert is going to be in Denver, and it's very, very important that this concert goes well because some of our main targets are in Colorado. It's a huge opportunity for us. And so what I want to ask you is that if you know people in Colorado who are great organizers and can help us get connected locally, please email me and connect me to those folks over email. Also, if you know people who aren't yet involved in organizing, but you think they could be a strong organizer and they're pissed off about the TPP, also connect them to me by email, and I'm going to share my email address in the chat box. And you can also email me with questions that might even be better than asking questions right now.
Thank you, Rose. Appreciate it. Our next speaker is Mara Cohen. She is part of our Trade Justice Alliance planning team. She is also works with Andrea and People Demanding Action on the End Mass Criminalization team. She works on the Agitator radio program, recruiting speakers and doing great outreach there. And she is currently working on a really great project for our team called the Organizers Resource Hub. Mara, your line is open. Hold on.
Sorry, I was seeing if I was muted.
Oh, okay.
And I wanted to talk to you tonight about some of the things we've been doing. I know I come on every night and every Sunday and tell you that we exist. We've done a couple things in the last couple of weeks. One is we've done some sort of brainstorming about what does a movement need? What does a movement need in order to grow both locally and nationally? And it was really interesting to hear people's answers. And if you want to muse about what you think a movement needs in order to grow and mature, send your answers in. We'll put them up on the hub. It's an interesting conversation. The other thing that we've been doing is getting lots of...
Excuse me. Can we move on to the next slide? I'm sorry, Mara.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, here is one of the pages for the Trade Resource Center. And this is our meme, and I guess the slide doesn't go down very far. But this is not the landing page. This is a link that you go to, and it has a lot of resources. It has a lot of links to other resource hub type places, like Popular Resistance has an enormous amount of resources available, and this hub has a lot more information available too. This is just one page with, you can see there's lots of links to go other places. So next slide, please. All right. We are doing things from very basic things all the way up to very, very difficult high-tech things. So this is one of the more basic things. A great organizer had the idea that she wanted to organize in the public postal service area, and both reach out to workers in the post office system and users. So we helped her comprise a good sheet that she could distribute, a good flyer, and she had a lot of success distributing it, and is now going to union halls and union meetings and handing out the information to the Postal Service. It's been very effective, and she's just a fantastic organizer. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the back page of the flyer, and let's see, it seems that only part of the flyer reproduced, but that's okay. It gives you an idea of what kinds of things we're trying to accomplish on flyers. And this is, the point of this is that it's a very selected audience. And if you are wanting to do an action with a very select audience or other organizers, and either you just are swamped by all the other things that you need to do in order to get an action ready, or you just don't know how to do it, or you want somebody to collaborate with, these are all good reasons to call into the Resource Hub or send us an email or whatever. Next slide, please. Okay. Let's see. This was supposed to be at the end of the Resource Hub. This is the other part of the back of the flyer. Seems like they got separated. So let's see. I hope the next slide is from, yeah, here we go. The high-tech aspect of this is a gentleman has developed a website called Voters Revenge. It's not up and running now. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. Voters Revenge is a website devoted to organizers being able to lobby their officials or thank and spank their representatives in Congress. He has compiled an enormous amount of information about everybody in the national legislature and as many people as he could find in the state legislatures who are either incumbents or running in the primaries. So it's late for a lot of the primaries, but a lot of the state house primaries are still coming up, and of course we still have a few national legislative campaigns going. So this will be very valuable before the election and after the election to shame and spank people who were bad and thank the ones who were good. Not to cut good and bad so tightly, but sometimes you can do that. So this is just a copy of what the page will look like when you at the beginning. This isn't the landing page, but it's the next page. Next slide, please, and that will be the last slide, I believe. This is what the page will look like when you go to it to get information about your state. It goes by state, by state. And what he is calling the groups of people. It's kind of complicated, but he's calling on people to join hands to get people out of office who really shouldn't be there, and to get people not to get into office in the first place if they shouldn't be there. So he has, like I was saying, all these statistics on how they voted, especially on trade, but other issues that would inform how they would vote on trade. So this is really a way of sifting the wheat from the chaff on an extremely local level for everyone who can do that. So join us at the Resource Hub. What we really want is, as well as to help people, is if you feel like you have any expertise, please phone it in, and then we can have you on a list of people to call when that subject comes up. The very last thing, I know I've gone over, but the very last thing I wanted to mention was that July 4th is coming up. It's a wonderful time to do flyering actions, a little bit of street theater, dress up funny, Uncle Sam hats with whatever. I'm unfortunately not that creative of a person, but if you call in, we have fantastic, very creative people who could help figure out some fun things to do. So I don't know. I think the cover slide, the slide with my picture, had the contact information. The contact information is just mine, but I distribute it to everybody. We all have access to the information. So get on the old horn and plan something fun for the 4th so that we can have solidarity ready for the Democratic National Convention and the lame duck. Thank you very much, and have a great evening. Check.
Great. Thank you, Mara. That was always great to hear from Mara. She put so much work into this tool, and it's going to be an amazing tool. Okay, real quick. I know it's getting late. I just wanted to tell you our next call. Our next webinar is going to be July 17th, and that is going to be the last call we're going to have before the March for a Clean Energy Revolution. So that's why we wanted to host a really super webinar on a super important, relevant campaign. This one is going to be about the fracked gas industry or the pipeline industry. It's going to be talking also about the regulatory system, or should I say the fracked gas enabling system and infrastructure. We're going to be hosting the very well-known Delaware Riverkeeper Maya Van Rossum, and also the great specter buster and president of the Withlacoochee, Alapaha, Little and Upper Suwannee Watershed Coalition, better known as Walls Watershed Coalition, and the president is John Quarterman, so he'll be speaking also. He's also knows a whole lot about trade, and so we're going to have a great webinar there, and we have some other great webinars planned. I think what I'll do now is I will move on to let Adam talk about a call that he's planning in August, and then we'll switch back to me to close out. So, Adam, go for it.
Okay, thanks everyone. And again, this slide will be, the image to go with this announcement will be in the report that you can find at tradejustice.net/news after the call, probably about half an hour to an hour after the call. The full newsletter will go up there along with the report from this call, which will include the slides. So on Sunday, August 7th, or Monday, August 8th in the Eastern Hemisphere, we are going to be having a webinar on TPP and mining, sovereignty, human rights, and environment at risk. Our speaker, our first confirmed speaker, will be J.B. Garganera, who is the national coordinator of Alianza Tigil-Mina, which is a coalition of organizations in the Philippines working working against the unsustainable mining industry, working for mining regulation, etc. Their organization is the co-publisher of a new report looking at investor rights agreements and how they are limiting the ability to regulate the mining industry in the Philippines, and of course TPP's investment chapter, if the Philippines becomes part of TPP, and the Philippines is one of the first countries that is being considered as an added country to TPP, would be yet another blow towards the ability to regulate mining because of the expanded rights of corporate investors. So if you'd like to register for that webinar, you can go to tradejustice.net/callreg, CALLREG. Again, that is Sunday, August 7th, and or Monday, August 8th in the Eastern Hemisphere, same time as this call, 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. And hope you'll be able to join us that evening. And please start spreading the word to anti-mining, climate, energy justice, etc. activists that you know, and please join us.
Okay. For a minute there, I thought it was having deja vu, but this is our Trade Justice Alliance Facebook page, and we really would like it if you all would visit our page and join us. There's lots of great stuff posted on here, including the PowerPoint, the audio, and the YouTube videos that Carrie puts together. So they're put there, and there's lots of trade news and updates on there every day. So please visit Trade Justice Alliance at Facebook, on Facebook. Okay? Okay, so last but not least, we really want to thank our entire team for all the great work they do to make these webinars possible. We usually do have lines that usually open, so we can't blame the team for that. And we really want to stress that we could use more people to help with doing all the work. It does take quite a bit of work to put these calls together. So, and I want to also say that even as a consultant with us for ideas and contacts and outreach, we're hoping that you will want to join us. That's why I have this space here, and your picture can go right there. So that's going to do it for tonight. I want to thank everyone so much for being with us. We recognize that there are a lot of other things that you could have done tonight, and so we just want to let you know we really appreciate your choice to join us. Have a great evening, and hope to see you on the next call. Thank you. The lines are open.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.